You're watching News 24 Live. The Health 24 team have been tracking the Ebola outbreak for us this year, and I'm joined in studio by Harry Phillips from Health 24 to give us the latest stats and facts on this pandemic. Harry, thank you for coming in.
Hi, Nick.
What is news this week?
Well, we've got some good news. We've got less bad news than usual, which is always nice. The good news is about treatment, vaccine, as it were. GSK have been working on a vaccine with the American Institute of Medicine, and they finally got some testing done, and it looks, fingers crossed, quite positive. The first hurdle they've got over is that it's safe. It's not going to kill anyone, which is the first thing you need to get past. And it does seem that it is effective, which is, of course, the most important thing. So it's a very small scale. We've only had, a couple of hundred people. But this is positive signs, and they can now expand the testing, and hopefully we're going to see something that's going to start slowing down the outbreak.
So in terms of the numbers that we've been mentioning sort of week on week, in terms of infections, the mortality rate, is that still progressively getting worse, or are we sort of seeing it sort of flatten out?
No, the rate is still about the same. So now we're up to just short of 16,000 cases and 6,000 deaths. The mortality rate is around 40% now, but it will go up as the disease progresses. It's just the unfortunate truth. So the three main countries, they're still growing, and of course we've now got Mali, which now has 8 cases. 8 cases isn't a huge issue. It's the same number of cases they had in Nigeria, and they managed to get things under control. So we don't have to worry about that for now. But hopefully Mali did learn some lessons from Senegal and Nigeria, who have managed to control small outbreaks like that, so we don't have another country joining Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea in having a full-blown outbreak.
And now there's mention of health workers dumping bodies in the streets. Is that still a problem over there?
Yeah, that was Sierra Leone. The health workers weren't getting paid. These are the guys who were in charge of burying the bodies. And they hadn't been paid for a number of weeks. And what they did in the end was they just dumped the bodies outside the hospital, which is, of course, a nightmare. Bodies are one of the biggest sources of transmission of Ebola. So, and this is actually where we see the real issue here, which is these are poor countries which can't afford to provide good healthcare as it is. And then they can't afford to manage the outbreak, so the outbreak gets worse. And this is just a vicious cycle that can really hinder any efforts to slow it down. And that could be a problem that could last for decades.
I mean, on that note, I read an interesting article on the BBC website of sort of the story of Ebola, this outbreak over the past year. So some very interesting infographics, and one of them was the number of people for every doctor or health professional in each affected country. I just want to read those numbers out. They're quite startling, just to see what an issue it is in West Africa. Liberia has 70,000 people for every doctor. Sierra Leone, 45,000. Mali, 12,000. Guinea, 10,000. But then the USA, 410. The UK, 360. Spain, 270. And Germany, 260. Now, those last few countries I mentioned have had very few isolated cases and are very well equipped to deal with it. So, this is a problem.
It's a huge problem. It's been a problem that's plagued Africa for decades. There's not enough doctors, there aren't enough hospitals. There isn't infrastructure there to prevent things like this. This is why, one little boy in the jungle can end up killing potentially tens of thousands of people with Ebola. And there's no quick solution to this, which is the worst part of it all. International aid agencies are always there to help, and other international governments are supporting Africa, but there's a long way to go before there's the sort of medical system you need to deal with any sort of outbreak.
Now, you mentioned before the interview the UN have had certain targets in terms of containing the outbreak, and they have failed to meet those targets. You want to just elaborate?
Yeah, they wanted to, by the end of November, have 70% of those with Ebola in hospitals or in treatment centres, and they wanted 70% of bodies to be buried. And they've fallen short of those. They haven't said how far short. But even if they've just fallen sort of 10%, then that's almost half of the people with Ebola not being treated and half of the bodies not being buried. And that's really going to cause problems down the line. They hope they're going to get there. The numbers are growing, so they're getting towards that 70%. But really you need 100% for this to work. You need to have 100% of people with Ebola being treated. You can't have, not even 99 is going to solve the problem. So they need to work, they need to get there, and they will, but they're not getting there as fast as they want to, and that's the problem.